Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Monday, Yom Sheni. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Yehuda in South Carolina, Bill in Missouri, Sharon in New Jersey, Guy in Ohio, Shandor in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, Jonathan, I'm so glad you're here, in Thousand Oaks, and finally defeating COVID, Baruch Hashem. Lucy in Minnesota, Paul in the Great Northwest, Spencer in Connecticut, Marie in Freeport, Chaim in Florida, Rochelle in Modesto. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by our very own Jonathan Hops, in honor and for the safety and the liberation of the hostages, as well as in honor and for the safety of the IDF, the members of Israel's defense forces. May they all be protected. May they all come home safely, the soldiers and the hostages. And please God, may this war end at the right time with a secure and lasting peace for the land of Israel and the nation of Israel everywhere. And we say Amen. Jonathan, thank you so much for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. May you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. And we say Amen. Our daf is page 107 here in Tractate Bava Metzia, the 22nd volume of the Talmud. Continuing our discussion of Mishna number 8 here in chapter 9. Mishnah 8 said that one who receives a field from another to plant it with barley may not plant it with wheat, because wheat drains the soil, weakens the soil. Likewise, if he rented it to plant wheat, he may not plant legumes, because legumes are more taxing on the soil than wheat would be. We picked this up fairly close to the top of 107a. The Mishnah states that one who receives a field to plant it with grain may not plant it with legumes. Rav Yehuda taught Ravin that the law is that one who receives a field to plant it with grain may plant it with legumes, seemingly in direct contradiction of our Mishnah. Ravin said to him, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah that one who receives a field to plant it with grain may not plant it with legumes? So Rav Yehuda said to him, this is not difficult, la kasha, as this halacha, this law is for us, the residents of Babylonia, and that halacha, that law is for them, the residents of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Since what type of seed to plant depends on the quality of the land, in Eretz Yisrael, where the land is weak, there is concern that the land will be depleted, will be further weakened. This concern does not apply to the Babylonian fields, where I guess the soil was much richer. So it's interesting, as I read that, I was reminded of the Fertile Crescent. Not that this comes up in conversation every day, But in the dim recesses of my mind, I remember learning about the Fertile Crescent, whether it was in high school or perhaps in college, but the Fertile Crescent, right? And so I thought, well, I figured the Fertile Crescent is, right, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, and so Babylonia for sure. But how far does the Fertile Crescent extend? So interesting. The Fertile Crescent is like an arc that includes the land of Israel, Mesopotamia, and Babylonia. I'm sure Bill has much more information at his fingertips than I do. But at any rate, the land of Israel was included in that Fertile Crescent. And so, why do we think of it as a desert? Why did the land become so weak? After all, it's the land of milk and honey. And of course, now there are parts that just are constantly blossoming and beautiful. Since, the modern state of Israel really came back and so much immigration, at the end of the 1800s, beginning 1900s, so many Jews came and started working the land. And it was so difficult in the beginning, but now they've made the desert bloom. But it also bloomed in the past. So there was the time when God blessed the land, for sure, right before we sort of fell out of grace. But another reason why the land became sort of reputed to be so barren and difficult is because of those Roman wars and the rebellions against Rome. And then the Romans got so fed up that they literally salted the earth, and they very much damaged the land with that. So at any rate, here we hear that the land, the soil of Israel is weak. We're reading that in the Gemara, right? So it's post those Roman wars, post that rebellion of Bar Kokhba, around the year 135. It's post the Mishna, which was redacted around the year 200, and perhaps a few hundred years later than that as well. But at any rate, Babylonia, the land, the soil is much richer in this period than it was in Israel. So Rav Yehuda said to Ravin bar Rav Nachman, Ravin, my brother, those cress plants, right, cress, that grow among flax are not subject to the prohibition of robbery, as the one taking them is effectively weeding the field, and the owner prefers that the cress not grow so as to not affect the growing flax. Speaking of what plants are good for the soil and which are not. But if the plants stand on the boundary of where the flax is growing so that they're remaining there would not have a negative impact on the growing flax, then they would be subject to the prohibition of robbery, as it is assumed that the owner grew the plants intentionally for his own use, not so people could just come along and take it. And if the cress plants were sufficiently grown to the point that they were hardened with seed growing inside, meaning they're fully grown, then even if they were growing among the flax, they are subject to the prohibition of robbery. And what is the reason? Concerning that flax to which they have already caused a loss, Since the flax has already been damaged by removing the cress, now he does nothing to improve the crop and merely takes something from the owner that doesn't belong to the one taking it. Ravin bar Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda owned adjacent fields, and their trees leaned over the boundaries, right, from one person's land over the boundary into the other. So Rav Yehuda said to Ravin bar Rav Nachman, Ravin, my brother, these that are mine are yours, and those that are yours are mine. And this is because it is customary with regard to those whose fields border on the land of their neighbors, that with regard to a tree that tilts to here, i.e. the property of one of them, its fruit belongs to the owner of the field here, meaning to where it is tilting. In other words, the stuff that grows over onto your land, feel free to take from that. And that which tilts to there belongs to the owner of the field there, right? So if the tree grows over onto the other guy's property, he can take fruit that's growing over his property, even though the trunk of the tree is in his neighbor's land. And Shmuel says the owners of the two fields divide all the fruit, right? So I guess, right, presumably only the fruit from borderline trees. Now, the Gemara raises an objection from a Baraisa. With regard to a tree that stands on the border between fields, they divide its fruit, right? So that's Shmuel's ruling. And this is apparently a conclusive refutation of Rav. And the Gemara responds that Shmuel interpreted the Baraisa so that it should be in accordance with the opinion of Rav, as referring to a case where the tree fills the entire boundary, and consequently it belongs to both of them. Otherwise, you just take what is growing over your land. The Gemara asks, if so, this is obvious. What is the purpose of the Baraisa stating its ruling? And the Gemara answers, no, it is not obvious. It is necessary in a situation where the boughs of the tree hang more to one side. And the Gemara asks, but still, what is the purpose of stating it? The novelty of this law remains unclear. And the Gemara explains, it is necessary lest you say that the owner of the field above which the boughs hang can say to the owner of the other field, let us divide the fruit in this manner, where each of us receives the fruit that grows over his land. And the Tana therefore teaches us that the owner of the land, the owner of the field, may say to him, what did you see to make you prefer to divide the fruit in this manner, based on bisecting the tree in one direction? Divide the fruit instead in that manner, i.e., based on bisecting the tree in the other direction, so that we each receive an equal share. And they left it at that. Rav Yehuda said to Rav Nachman, Rav and my brother. Now they start to give advice to each other, and we're going to enter a beautiful section of this daf, where we're going to get wisdom from the sages about what to eat, what not to eat, how to arrange your home, all kinds of beautiful little folk teachings, wisdom teachings, but based in scripture, based in the Bible. So, Rav Yehuda said to Rav and Bar Rav Nachman, Rav and my brother, do not buy land that is near a town. Right? You want your land to be a little bit more rural, not quite so close to town. Why does he say this? As Rabbi Abahu says that Rav Huna says that Rav says, it is prohibited for a person to stand by another's field when its ripe grain is standing, i.e., when its produce is ready for harvest. Is this interesting? So it's about somebody's wealth is about to come in, right? I mean, if you're a farmer, agrarian society, you work that land all year, and you finally reach the harvest, and now, please God, right? You've been working and praying for this moment that you're going to have a nice, abundant harvest, and that's what's going to basically, feed your family, sustain your family for the coming year. It's a very important moment. And at that moment, it is prohibited, according to Rav, for a person, just for meaning a Jew in this case, for a Jew, because that's who's going to listen to the rulings of the sages, it is forbidden for a person to stand next to that field which is about to be harvested and which means so much to its owner. Why? Because this person might harm the produce with the evil eye. Ha-ayin, hara, the evil eye. And similarly, land near a town may be harmed by the people of the town watching it. If everybody's keeping an eye on, goes, oh yeah, look at that field, it belongs to so-and-so. Yeah, it looks like he's going to have a really good year. Wow, yeah. Yeah, really good year. I wonder if he deserves to have such a good year, right? And these people casting their eyes in this manner of wishing harm to the owner because they're jealous, etc., that's the evil eye, and the evil eye can have consequences. Now the Gemara asks, is that so? But when Rabbi Abba encountered Rav's students, right? So Rav said, a person shouldn't stand near the field of another that's about to be harvested. But Rav's students said to them, what does Rav say with regard, Rabbi Abba asked Rav's students, what does Rav say with regard to the meaning of these verses of blessing? Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the field. That's from Deuteronomy 28, right? When Moses, near the end of his life, is saying, basically, if you, the Jewish people, follow the Torah, you're going to receive all these wonderful blessings. But if you turn your back on the Torah and on God's commandments, and in that way turning your back on God, then all these curses shall befall you, right? So now we're talking about the blessings. So how does Rav interpret this verse? Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the field. So Rav interprets, the next verse is, or 3 verses later, and so he's asking, how does Rav interpret these 2 verses? The first is, blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the field. And the second verse is, blessed shall you be when you enter, and blessed shall you be when you exit. Right? So how does Rav interpret this? And Rav's students, said to him, this is what Rav said. Blessed shall you be in the city means that your house should be adjacent to a synagogue. And the phrase, blessed shall you be in the field, means that your property should be near the city. Right? So it's considered a blessing if you live near a synagogue, because it's going to be that much easier to go there and pray and learn. Makes sense. But also, it's a blessing to live near the city. Well, but didn't Rav say that it's better for you to have a field that's not near the city so people won't cast their evil eye upon it? So now he's saying it's a blessing to live near the city. So what's going on? Right? So blessed shall you be in the city. That means your house should be adjacent to a synagogue. And blessed shall you be in the field. That means your property should be near the city. Blessed shall be when you enter means that you will not find your wife in a state of uncertain menstrual purity when you return from a trip, which means that she'll be prohibited to you when the two of you would like to celebrate that you've returned. And blessed shall you be when you go out. This means that those who emerge from you, i.e. your descendants, should be like you. If you're a righteous person, then you should have righteous descendants. And Rabbi Abba said to them, Rabbi Yochanan did not say this. But he interpreted the verse in a different way. He said, blessed shall you be in the city means that there should be a bathroom near your table. But he did not refer to a synagogue. So why does Rabbi Yochanan disagree with Rav on this? First of all, it sounds a little, mundane, not so spiritual. But when you think that the people in this era did not have indoor plumbing, right? And if you lived in the city, it wasn't like you had your own outhouse out back. Rather, you'd have to walk down the street to some field that was set aside for this purpose, where all the people in that area, in that neighborhood, would go to that outdoor field to relieve themselves. So a blessing would be that you don't have to walk very far. How many blocks do you have to walk every time you want to relieve yourself? Imagine that. Can you imagine how much we take for granted living in modern times? And with regard to but why wouldn't Rabbi Yochanan say that it's a blessing to live near the synagogue? Okay, we understand it's nice to have a bathroom not too far away. But why would you not want to live near a synagogue? And Rabbi Yochanan conforms to his line of reasoning in this regard, as he says, there is a reward for the steps one takes to reach the location of a mitzvah. And one who lives adjacent to a synagogue will not have the opportunity to earn this reward. So isn't that great? Every time you go to shul, right, especially on Shabbos when you're walking, but particularly in a walking culture like theirs, every time you walk to the synagogue, not only is it a mitzvah to be in the synagogue and praying, but every step you take to get to the synagogue is part of that mitzvah and gives you greater reward for doing it. The Gemara returns to Rabbi Yochanan's exposition of these verses. Blessed shall you be in the field means that your property should be divided into thirds. 1/3 should be invested in grain, 1/3 in olives, and 1/3 in grapevines. Blessed, right, diversify your portfolio in case blight attacks one of these kinds of produce, it won't attack the others. Blessed shall you be when you enter, and blessed shall be when you exit. According to Rabbi Yochanan, this means that your exit from the world should be like your entry into the world. Just as your entry into the world was without sin, because you were born without sin, so too your exit from the world should be without sin. Now we're on page 107b. In any case, it is evident that Rav approves of one whose property is located near a city, And we just learned a little, a few paragraphs up, that Rav's saying you shouldn't have your land near a city because you might attract the evil eye. So that's the contradiction. And the Gemara answers, La Kasha, this is not difficult. This statement is referring to a wall and an additional partition that surround the plot and prevent it from being harmed by the evil eye. And that statement is referring to a case where a wall and an additional partition do not surround it. It's good to have your land near the city as long as it's out of view. If it's going to be in view and attract the evil eye, then it's not so good. The Gemara returns to expounding the themes of blessings and the evil eye. So the Torah states, Deuteronomy 7:15, and the Lord will take away from you all sickness. In interpreting this verse, Rav says, this verse is speaking about the evil eye. And the Gemara comments, Rav conforms to his line of reasoning as Rav went to a graveyard and he did what he did. That's what the Gemara says here, but we know from other places in the Talmud what he did. What he did was he used an incantation to find out how those buried there had died. So he had some kind of supernatural insight, and he learned how everyone who's buried in that graveyard, what was their cause of death. And he said that 99 of these people died by the evil eye, and only one died by entirely natural means. Entirely natural, right? So obviously people get old, people get sick, people have misfortune, people have accidents. It's not that only the evil eye causes other people to die. But the evil eye contributes to the downfall of a person. And he said it contributed to the downfall of 99 out of 100 people. And Shmuel says this term, all sickness, does not refer to the evil eye. It refers to the wind. And the Gemara comments that Shmuel conforms to his line of reasoning. As Shmuel says, every injury suffered by people is due to the wind that enters wounds and bodily cavities. Now, that's fascinating, right? They didn't have germ theory back then. But Shmuel was able to piece together that airborne contaminants could cause infection. The Gemara asks, but according to Shmuel, aren't there those executed by the monarchy and others killed by traumatic injury? And that has nothing to do with the wind. And the Gemara responds, with regard to these two, were it not for the wind, they would prepare a medicine for those injured people and they would be healed and they would live. But the wind prevents this from happening, meaning infection. Right, airborne infection sets in and creates damage. I mean, obviously, they didn't have microscopes. They didn't understand about viruses and bacteria and other causes of infection, but they understood a lot from what they could observe with the naked eye. Rabbi Hanina says, this phrase, all sickness, refers to the cold. As Rabbi Hanina says, all occurrences that befall man, meaning humans, are at the hands of heaven, except for excess cold and heat. As it is stated, cold and heat are on the path of the perverse. He who guards his soul shall keep far from them. Proverbs 22:5. He's saying there's a lot of stuff in this world that is out of our control. And please, God, spare us from all these things that are beyond our control. But what's in our control is on a cold day, you don't leave the house without your coat, like your mom told you and like your grandma told you if you were fortunate enough to hear it from them, right? How many times did they tell us that? How many times do we as parents tell our kids that? Don't go out without a coat. That's in your power to protect yourselves. Protecting yourselves from heat. Okay, so what could you do? I mean, obviously there's a limit. They didn't have air conditioning, but you could make sure you're hydrated. You could make sure that you eat and drink in a manner that's going to protect you from excessive heat. Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina says that this phrase, all sickness, that we should be blessed to avoid that, refers to excrement. As the master says, with regard to excrement of the nose, that's snot, right? Mucus. And excrement of the ear, We're talking about earwax. So if a large amount is emitted, having so much of it, that's harmful. But having a little bit of it is beneficial, right? So if your ears and your nose are producing more secretion than is normal, that's harmful. Go talk to your doctor. Rabbi Lazar says this term, all sickness, refers to the gallbladder. The Gemara adds, this is also taught in Baraisa. With regard to the term sickness, this refers to the gallbladder. And why is the gallbladder called sickness? It is because it makes a person's entire body ill. Alternatively, it is called sickness because 83 diseases, the numerical value of machala, the word sickness, are dependent on the gallbladder. And the Gemara comments, and with regard to all of them, consuming bread in the morning with salt and drinking a large jug of water negates their ill effects, as a simple morning meal is beneficial to the body. A simple morning meal. You should drink liquid in the morning, right? Water. And bread. Now, bread is interesting. So they're saying don't have some kind of huge repast, steak and eggs, probably not a good idea, early in the morning. Have something simple. But bread, simple as it is, also means that you're going to wash and bless and then recite the grace after the meal, right? So you're gonna get a formal blessing and thanksgiving after the meal to God. That's what it means every time we eat bread, that it's a proper meal, and they're recommending we do that in the morning. Now the Gemara cites a related baraisa. The sages taught that 13 matters of praise were stated with regard to a meal of bread eaten in the morning. It protects the diner from the heat and from the cold and from the winds and from the harmful spirits. And it makes the simple wise. And one who consumes it will be victorious in judgment. He will merit to learn Torah and to teach it. And his statements are heard, and his study will remain in his possession. Thank you, Grandma. Because I was blessed that my grandmother lived with us when I was growing up. She was a Holocaust survivor. And she always made sure that I had a proper breakfast. And a breakfast that I really liked and that she made for me every day was avocado toast. Just very simple. Toast with some avocado spread on it, with a little bit of mayonnaise and salt mixed in with the avocado. And I wasn't religious, so I probably was not saying a blessing before and certainly not benching afterward. But I had a simple meal of bread in the morning, like most of the days, that I went to high school, and I was blessed. High school went well for me. So thank you so much, Ita. And maybe I need to take this to heart and start having toast in the morning again instead of my usual cereal. Remember that, Sal. Remember that. Okay. In addition, this one who eats bread in the morning, his flesh does not generate excess sweat, and he engages in intercourse with his wife at the proper time, and he does not lust for another woman. And this meal is so advantageous that it even kills any louse in his intestines. And some say it even removes jealousy and brings in love. Since he is completely healthy, he is not inclined to be angered by others. That is a lot of benefit from eating simple bread in the morning. In relation to the above baraisa, Rabba said to Rabba Bar Mari, from where is this matter that people say derived? 60 runners ran but could not catch the man who ate in the morning. And the sages likewise said, arise early and eat, in the summer due to the sun and in the winter due to the cold, so that one's body should have the strength to withstand the climate. Rava Bar Mari said to him, it is derived from a verse, as it is written, they shall not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor the sun smite them. Isaiah 49:10. Why will the heat and the sun not smite them? Since they shall not hunger nor thirst, as they rose early to eat. Rava said to him, you said to me that it is derived from there, but I say to you that it is derived from a different verse. Quote, and you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water. Exodus 23:25, which he interprets as follows, and you shall serve the Lord your God. This refers to the recitation of the Shema and the Amidah, right? The standing prayer, the Shemona Esrei. Both prayers, we say them in the morning, and this constitutes your daily service of God. Quote, and he will bless your bread and your water. This refers to bread with salt and a large jug of water consumed after the morning prayers. You can't eat before you pray in the morning, but you should eat right after. And he, after the morning prayers. And from that point onward, the rest of the verse, and I will take sickness away from your midst, will be fulfilled, right? So there's that connection. One who eats bread and water in the morning, all the sickness will be taken away from him. And as we've seen, different interpretations of what that sickness is. Some say the evil eye, some say all these different kinds of diseases of the body, but you'll be in a much healthier state if you get up in the morning, you pray, and then you eat some bread and water. Rav Yehuda said to Rav Ada the surveyor, do not treat measuring lightly, even for small areas of land, as each little bit is suitable for growing the cultivated saffron, which is a very expensive product. We're back to growing food on your land, on your neighbor's land. When do you split it? If somebody says he's going to plant wheat and he plants legumes, is it a problem? That's how he got into this subject. So now he's saying that you have to be very meticulous about surveying the land and making sure that each landowner knows it's demarcated what land belongs to which person. And the reason you have to be so careful is because even a tiny plot of land can produce valuable produce. Example, saffron, which is very expensive. Now, with regard to the 4 cubits measured adjacent to an irrigation channel, right? Adjacent to an irrigation channel, we're not going to have the farm go right up to it because people need to have access to that channel to make repairs. So with regard to the 4 cubits measured adjacent to an irrigation channel, those you may treat lightly, and it is not necessary to provide an exact measurement of them when calculating the areas of fields. And as for the 4 cubits adjacent to a river, do not measure them at all, but simply estimate the size and include them in the larger measurement. And the Gemara comments, in this regard, Rav Yehuda conforms to his line of reasoning. As Rav Yehuda says, the 4 cubits adjacent to a channel belong to the residents of the houses alongside the channel, while the 4 cubits adjacent to a river belong to everyone. Rabbi Ami would announce, cut down the trees along the width of the full shoulders of the pullers of the boat on both sides of the river, so that the trees should not interfere with the pulling of the boats. Right? So if you ever remember that song, 15 Miles on the Erie Canal, I used to sing that in elementary school. Get up there, Sal, who's a mule. Get up there, Sal, we've passed that lock. 15 miles on the Erie Canal, right? So canals, how did they work? They were used that you would pull a barge, right? They didn't have engines on these barges. They would have pullers, either human or animal, pulling the barge down the canal, right? And they're walking down the path alongside the canal, right? The towpath. In Washington, there's a towpath, which is a nice place to go hiking. That's what the towpath is. It's where the animals would walk towing the barges in the canal. And you have to make sure that that path is clear so that the barge traffic can get down the canal. Rav Nassan Bar Hoshaya instructed people to cut down 16 cubits on each side of the river, and the residents of Mashronia came upon him and beat him for issuing this directive. He cut too much into their land. And the Gemara explains he holds that any pathway must be made as wide as like a public domain, which is 16 cubits wide. But that is not so, as there, in the case of a public domain, we do require that much space. But here, however, the space is necessary. The space that is necessary needs to be only enough to enable the stretching of the ropes to pull the boats. Therefore, the width of the full shoulders of the pullers is the sufficient measure of the space needed in order not to interfere with the pulling of the boats, and you don't have to make a whole thoroughfare that cuts into the fields that are adjacent to the canals. The Gemara relates another incident. Rabba bar Rav Huna had a certain forest on the bank of a river, and they said to him, let the master cut down the trees on the riverbank in accordance with the above statement. And Rabba bar Rav Huna said to them, let those above and below me along the river cut down their trees first, and then I will cut down my trees. Right? You have to get everyone to agree, otherwise no one wants to go first. So I will achieve nothing by cutting down my own trees. If we don't have a path that runs the full length of the river, what difference does it make if some of the people clear that space? You need a road to cut through everybody's land. And until we have agreement to that, no one's going to start cutting down on their own land. So the Gemara asks, how can he do so? How can he wait for others to act? But isn't it written, gather yourselves together and gather? In Zephaniah, and Reish Lakish says concerning this, adorn yourself and afterward adorn others. Meaning, if you want other people to act in a certain way, so be a leader and start acting that way first. Even though there won't be benefit until everyone acts that way, you can start. So the Gemara responds, in that case, it was the forest of the house of Parzak the general, and it was obvious that the Persians would pay no attention to what a Jewish scholar was doing. So Rabba bar Rav Huna therefore said, if the workers of the Persian officer cut down, I will cut down as well. And if they do not cut down, why should I cut down to no purpose? Since if the pullers can stretch the ropes, they can go along this side of the river. And if not, they will be unable to walk, but will have to cross over to the other side. Therefore, no advantage exists to cutting down the trees that block part of the river, unless everybody on this side cooperates. Now we're on page 108a and getting a little bit of a head start so that we can, start to catch up. The Gemara cites a related incident. Rabba bar Rav Nachman was going on a boat and saw a certain forest that was located right on the riverbank, as its trees had not been cut down to make room for the pullers of the boat. He said to those who were with him, to whom does this forest belong? They said to him, it belongs to Rabba bar Rav Huna. Rabba bar Rav Huna said, this is reminiscent of the verse, and the hand of the princes and the rulers has been first in this faithlessness, because a renowned scholar is acting improperly. So Rabba bar Rav Nachman said to them, cut down, right? He said he's the opposite of what was said before. Okay, I'll be the first and get started, and hopefully that'll set a good example. Rabba bar Rav Huna arrived and found that his forest had been cut down. Oh, they did it for him. Since he was within his rights not to cut down his trees, as explained above, because the Persian general wasn't cutting down his trees, he grew angry and he pronounced a curse. He who cut down this forest should have his branches cut down. Now, right? The curse sounds pretty legit. What happened was, right, one sage saw that another sage did not have his part of the forest cut down. And he said, well, this guy should be acting like a leader. So right now, since we've got people available to do the cutting, go ahead and cut it. I'm sure that this sage will agree that his forest should be cut down. So, it was Rabba bar Rav Nachman who said, go ahead and cut down the trees that belong to Rabba bar Rav Huna. And so these workers cut down those trees. And then Rabba bar Rav Huna comes home and sees that his own forest, without his authorization, the part of it near the water has been cut down. And he says, okay, well, whoever cut down my trees, his branches should be cut down. The problem is, the words of the sages have so much power that this was a curse. And it created the consequences of a curse. He who cut down my forest, he said, he who cut down this forest should have his branches cut down. And the sages said, although Rabba bar Rav Huna was unaware of the identity of the perpetrator, the curse of a sage is nevertheless fulfilled. And consequently, all the remaining years that Rabba bar Rav Huna was alive, the seed of Rabba bar Rav Nachman did not last, as his children, right, his branches, died in his lifetime. Right, so Rabba bar Rav Huna never would have cursed Rabba bar Rav Nachman if he'd known that it was him. He didn't do it on purpose, but his words were fulfilled. That's why you have to be so careful with what you say especially if you're some kind of a leader. Rav Yehuda says all participate in the payment for the construction of the city wall, and this sum is collected even from orphans, but not from the Torah scholars. And what is the reason for this? The Torah scholars do not require this protection, as the merit of their Torah study protects them from harm. By contrast, money is collected for the digging of a river or a well for drinking water, even from Torah scholars. And by the way, where the Torah scholars don't have to give to a communal project, the only Torah scholars who qualify for that exemption are the Torah scholars who study all day long, not part-time Torah scholars. The Gemara adds, and we said this halacha only if the town inhabitants do not go out in a crowd to perform the work themselves, but they pay workers to act on their behalf. But if the people themselves go out in a crowd, then the Torah scholars do not have to join them, as Torah scholars are not among those who go out in a crowd to perform work in public view. Their work is in the study hall, which provides protection to that town anyway. Rav Yehuda says, with regard to the digging of a river, i.e. the periodic deepening of a riverbed to prevent it from blocking up, the lower ones, i.e. those who live by the bottom of the river, must assist the upper ones in digging it and fixing it, as those located at the bottom of the river stand to gain from any work performed down to their houses. But the upper ones do not need to assist the lower ones, as the reverse is not the case. And the opposite is true with regard to the digging of a ditch to remove rainwater. In that case, those who live higher up are interested in the operation and therefore must help the lower ones. But the lower ones do not need to help the upper ones in doing so in the upper area. The Gemara comments that this is also taught in a Baraisa. If there were 5 gardens that draw their water requirements from one spring, and the spring became damaged, all must help to fix it with the owner of the upper garden near whose garden the damage occurred. As a result of this ruling, the owner of the lower garden fixes it with all of them in the above case and fixes it for himself if the damage occurred in the lower area. In other words, whoever's affected by the damage has to participate in the help. If he's not affected by the damage, he doesn't have to participate in the repair. And similarly, if there were 5 courtyards that would run off water into a single sewer, and the sewer became damaged, then all of them must help the owner of the lower courtyard near whose courtyard the damage occurred. The result is that the owner of the upper courtyard fixes the sewer with all of them, and he fixes it for himself if the damage affected his courtyard alone. And this is in accordance with Rav Yehuda's ruling. Shmuel says, one who takes possession of an open space left along a riverbank for the purpose of loading and unloading in order to plow and plant there during the time that it is temporarily unused, this person is impudent. As for removing him, we do not remove him, as this piece of land is considered ownerless. And nowadays, 1,500 years ago, when the Persians write to one who acquires land alongside a river, acquire for yourself the field up to the portion of the river itself where the water reaches a horse's neck, we even go so far as to remove him from the plot of land, as it belongs to the owner of the field. Rav Yehuda says, one who takes possession of land that is located between the land of brothers or between the land of partners and causes them trouble. This is an impudent person. As for removing him, we do not remove him. In other words, he's done something that is technically legal, but that causes bother and irritation and maybe even harm to other people. What he did is legal, but it harms others. So we can't legally remove him, but we call him a name and say he's impudent for having taken that field because it should have been taken by somebody whose land is adjacent to it. Made much more sense for him to be there. So as for removing him, we do not remove him. And Rav Nachman said, we even go so far as to remove him. One should not do anything that harms another, and a court will step in, at least in Rav Nachman's jurisdiction, to make sure of it. And if the complaint against him is due to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor, as they own fields bordering on this one, we do not remove him, right? Because that's how it happened. In other words, if you own a field and you're going to sell it, and so you first have to, get a price for what it's worth, and then you have to give the offer of first refusal to your neighbor because it's very convenient for him to have 2 adjoining fields. If he doesn't want to buy it, then you can sell it to whoever. So that is not the same halacha as what we do about somebody who took an ownerless piece of land that was next to somebody else, right? That's not the particular law of one selling a field should offer it to his neighbor first. Doesn't match the facts of this case. And I'm almost done, very close to done. So questions or comments, please get them in now. So the sages of Neardea say, even if his claim was due to the law of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor, we do remove him. As it is stated, and you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. Deuteronomy 6:18. So one should not perform an action that is not right and good, even if he is legally entitled to do so. And that's where we'll stop, and God willing, we will continue at 6 p.m. Pacific, the regular Tuesday time, tomorrow. I'll take some questions, but a reminder that Wednesday is the night of the premiere of our movie Guns N' Moses. So that day, we'll have class at a special time, the Friday schedule of noon Pacific. That will be on Wednesday. Wednesday, noon Pacific will be our class. Jonathan, with regard to weak land, I wonder whether the laws about legumes, barley, and wheat is still halacha now in the area of Monsanto and other better living through chemistry. I think that's a really interesting question. Especially the problem, right, with all these genetically modified organisms. On the one hand, land is certainly being improved by the wonderful chemistry we have available in modern times of fertilizers that can make all kinds of produce grow, where maybe in ancient times they couldn't make it grow. But so much of this chemistry, how much do we really know about it? What kind of long-term studies do we really have? There were so many things that seemed wonderful, right? And then turned out to cause cancer to tremendous large groups of people. I mean, the more we follow the ancient wisdom that was tested over centuries, very often the better we're doing. Sharon, wait, isn't a negative commandment that we not practice necromancy? So how could the sage who used some kind of incantation to find out how those people had died, what was their cause of death? Great question. Bill offers, necromancy is prohibited, but the Torah defines necromancy in very tightly bound sorts of ways. The question would be essentially, was he calling the dead up from their rest to demand answers? Or was he, for example, inquiring of the heavenly court on their behalf as to the causes of their deaths? Or more simply, was he getting the answers from the dead themselves or from the angels? Excellent answer, Bill. I would definitely agree with that. I don't think that any sage is going to violate the prohibition on necromancy. So he must have had some legal manner to do so. However, there's probably a lot of practices that the sages were able to do because they knew exactly what the law was and what their limitations were and what the boundaries were, and that they, by rabbinic decree, would prevent, the rest of us from doing it because it would definitely lead us into trouble, right? And we know about this. I mean, the Sanhedrin did have to have knowledge of Avodah Zarah in order to protect people from coming to commit it. Avodah Zarah is idolatry, right? So they actually had to study the idolatrous practices of the surrounding idolaters to understand what those practices were, so that they could then issue decrees that would prevent people, from coming into the influence of idolatry. It doesn't mean they would ever commit idolatry, but they had to come a little bit closer to that line, for real and righteous reasons. And so I'm not saying that Rav, that he was committing any kind of necromancy, but he could probably do something that was a little bit closer to it and that the rest of us might not be able to. So I think Sharon's point is also well taken. Jonathan says, ha-ayin, hara, right, the evil eye. We seem to be talking about the perspective of the victim, but we should also think of it from the perspective of the envious one. The story tells us that we may have more effect on our world and the world of others than we know. So we should avoid even hints of what could give an evil eye to others inadvertently. Guard your thoughts and steer them towards the well-being of all. 100%. And I think this is also one of the reasons why lashon hara, right, evil speech, meaning talking about people, right, and the master of the laws of lashon hara was the Chafetz Chaim. And Nina has taught, she really studies this and has taught many lessons about this here at Accidental Talmudis, because the Chafetz Chaim is so meticulous about this, right? And so one of the things you don't do is talk about other people, even to praise them. Now that when they're not there, you can issue all the praise you want to somebody's face. It's a wonderful thing to do and tell them how well they're doing, as long as you're not speaking falsely because you're flattering to try to get some advantage out of it. But it's great to praise people and make them feel good. But when you're talking about others who are not there, right? The conversation which begins by listing the praises of somebody who's not in the room can so easily turn into gossip and criticism and saying, oh yeah, did you hear so-and-so? He's such a wealthy guy. And, how much charity did he really give last year? He's such a wealthy guy, but yeah, he wasn't nice to me, right? And so very quickly the conversation can go to this negative place. And we've got to guard ourselves from going there. We got to stop ourselves from going there. It's so difficult, right? It's so difficult. What's that Eleanor Roosevelt statement? Big people, small people talk about other people. There's 3 steps that I'm getting it wrong. But basically, big people talk about ideas. Small people talk about other people, right? And we got to train ourselves just to not engage in, now I'm talking about speech, but it's so related to the way we cast our eyes on others and allow those feelings of covet, right, and jealousy to start building up in ourselves. If we have to look at other people and what they do, so much better to think to ourselves, wow, how inspiring. That person was able to succeed. That means there's a path. I could do it too. And now just focus on acting righteously and working hard and praying to God and doing your ishtadlus, and accepting the outcome. And, just take inspiration and focus on your own stuff, on our own stuff. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And again, reminder, Wednesday, the class will be at noon Pacific. All the best.